Welcome, quiet soul, you always hear what others miss. So today you are a fresh recruit thrown into the trenches of World War I, where every meal is a brutal test of willpower and survival. You'll taste the delicacies of hell, stone-hard bread, watery soup, old canned meat, and witness the underground food trades amid a hail of bullets. Will you have the courage to laugh, to share, to survive, and to truly appreciate every ordinary meal you have? And before we dive in, I'd love to know, did anything in this story strike a chord with you, stir your curiosity? Drop a comment below. Who knows, your thought might just become the little treasure. The whole community will want to dig up. And hey, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to like, share, or hit subscribe, because sometimes a single click can send 100 amazing stories rippling outward. Today's story puts you right at the front lines of a World War I trench, tasting the real menu, 8-day-old bread, watery mud soup, expired canned meat, and secret food trades in the middle of shell fire. This isn't just a survival challenge for show, it's the ultimate test of patience, creativity, and the will to live through the hell of war. The first day in the trenches. As soon as you set your pack down along the muddy edge, the weight of trench cuisine settles around you. Old soldiers huddle by a bubbling soup pot, shoulders hunched against the cold while steam coils upward, carrying a strange, almost sweet and sour aroma that clings to the air and refuses to leave. Rats dart across the patchy mud, bright eyes flashing with mischief. They pay little attention to people here, for in this place nothing seems able to tempt a creature away from its appetite. You weave your way through the crowd, one hand gripping the pack's flap, your heart racing as the scent of hot soup brushes your nose. It feels like crossing into another world, a place where every rule of eating you ever knew has crumbled into dust. Those gathered around the soup pot remain silent, raising an eyebrow, or casting sidelong glances your way, sending an unspoken message: this world welcomes only those brave enough to test their stomachs before they test themselves against shells and bullets. Steam drifts up, wrapping a faint mist around your coat, leaving a thin crust of salt on your cheeks, and soaking your skin in the strange perfume of the pot. Hands clamp tight around a battered wooden spoon. Your eyes follow the drifting threads of wilted green, slivers of pale meat, circles of fat clinging to the pot's rim. Something sharp tingles on your tongue, a sensation only the trenches can provide, at once inviting and unsettling. Memories of home-cooked meals strike in a flash, the warmth of fresh broth, the tenderness of soft bread, or the gentle fragrance rising from a familiar hearth. Yet all that recedes before the sharp cold of the present, where the soup's vapour mingles with the deep, rough laughter of men who have seen too much. Hot broth passes from hand to hand, and each gaze, equal parts humour and challenge, suggests that everyone here has tasted disappointment since their first moment in this world. Stories about the head cook echo in your mind. He is said to possess a hand that blends both heaven and hell into a single pot. Every newcomer arrives full of culinary dreams, only to walk away with memories of heat sliding down their throat and the acidic tang of wartime rations clinging to their palate. Every meal in the trenches tests the nerves and the will. The steaming pot makes no promises except bare survival. Eating here is never a matter of choice but of necessity. Everyone understands that these rations offer alertness and the urge to carry on more so than any speech or empty vow. Warmth travels from the bowl to your frozen fingers, and the sound of the spoon scraping across metal rings out dry but oddly comforting. Your eyes drift along the tiny cracks in your tin bowl as your thoughts wander to all the stories born in this place, from heated arguments over meagre portions to the ridiculous bet struck among hungry soldiers. Nearby, the mud creeps steadily closer to your boots and cold seeps through every layer of fabric. Your chest tightens with each shallow breath. Hunger churns within you, yet a smile pulls at your lips. Amid the chill, the haze, the chaos, and the plain meal before you, a strange sense of warmth glows unexpectedly. Here, in a place where every value is tested to its limit, a steaming bowl of soup can light up even the bleakest day. You lift the soup to your face, the odd fragrance swirling with the cold air, and sip. The broth winds through your throat, hard to swallow, yet it brings clarity to your mind. Each strand of vegetable, every crumb of bread dissolves on your tongue, leaving behind a tangled aftertaste of sweat, rain, gunpowder, and the faintest hope for tomorrow. In this way, the culinary world of the trenches unfurls before you, opening an entirely new journey. Here there are only two dishes horrifying and even more horrifying. Suddenly your very existence becomes a long contest between stomach and spirit. No one asks if you are ready. Your first meal stands as proof that you belong to this place now, a survivor locked in a daily game where food plays the most ruthless trick. Morning mist settles over the trenches. Each breath of soup mingles with the cold, rough laughter, side glances between comrades and trembling hands passing the hot broth around. Together, these moments compose a gritty soldier's symphony. Every sip of soup, every bite of bread as hard as stone, every furtive glance at the day's rations becomes a marker on the road to maturity, a place where each person tastes the full range of war, from bitterness to warmth, from fear to pride. You find yourself settling into the rhythm of trench life, where a humble meal becomes a story worth telling, packed with steam, the smell of earth, and the comfort of people enduring endless days at your side. Here everything begins with the strange taste of soup, the distant echo of artillery, and the bite of cold mud. Everything ends with the wry resignation of the survivors, those with the fortitude to call themselves trench dwellers. Your first breakfast in the trenches bore no resemblance to anything tucked away in your childhood memories. With the morning fog still hovering over the ditch and the cold mud creeping up past your knees, you made your way to the ration station. A splintered wooden crate stood by the edge, a tray of bread stacked on the top loaves, long and ghostly older than the youngest soldier in the line. The crust bore a grey pallor cracking with age and peppered with pale specks of mould. The first touch brought the sensation of sun-dried brick fingers numbed by the chill tingling from the jagged texture of its weathered surface. Down at the end of the line, a veteran showcased what had become a performance art of the trenches, slamming a loaf down onto an ammunition box with a bang that echoed like hell's kitchen door being kicked open. Even the rats nearby flinched. Each time the crust gave way with a dry snap, fragments scattered, and soldiers behind quietly gathered them up, offering no complaints. All eyes turned toward the bread as if witnessing a sacred ritual. Someone attempted to soak a piece in cold water to soften it. The bread drank deeply, yet remained as firm as stone, though it took some mercy on the teeth. Beside the rations, a pot of watery soup let out a soft hiss. The broth shimmered with a few globules of fat catching the light as they danced between bits of wilted grass, root fragments, and something vague lurking beneath the surface. The aroma was faint, laced with the earthy tang of aged vegetables, and a whisper of black pepper clinging on for dear life. You scooped a ladle into your tin bowl, watched the thin liquid slip through the spoon's edge, leaving a peculiar trace on your tongue. Trench soup did little to fill the belly, but planted a hollow that stretched quietly from the throat down into the gut. Once everyone had settled with their portions, the unofficial bread-breaking contest commenced. Hardened hands gripped loaves like hammers, testing their strength against this culinary nemesis. Whoever managed to crack off a substantial chunk without chipping a tooth was instantly crowned a hero of the morning. The event carried on amid bursts of laughter, the sharp crunch of shattering crust, and the occasional tired sigh tinged with amusement. Excitement stirred again when a plump rat burst from the mud and darted between your feet, heading straight for the soup pot. The mood paused, then shifted as a round of rat tails rose up from the muck. One soldier spoke of waking at midnight to find a rat nibbling bread beneath his pillow. Another claimed he once saw a rat swimming in the soup, doing a taste check perhaps. Laughter rippled through the trench. The rats had become part of the culture, a daily fixture adding flavour to a world that tasted otherwise of metal and mildew. Before the humour faded, a new topic emerged, the mystery toppings of the day. A soldier held up a dark, shriveled object in his bowl, half a cockroach perhaps, lounging beside a strand of green. Voices rose in amused speculation, then settled again beneath a chorus of laughter. Hunger, it seemed, had taught everyone to keep calm and eat what was served without a blink. You chewed on a piece of bread so tough your jaw tingled. Soup trickled down your throat, watery tinged with a peppery sting, and the faint bitterness of rotting roots. Your thoughts drifted to mornings at home when you would grimace at bland greens your mother lovingly prepared. Yet here, a cracked loaf in hand and a bitter wind in your face, those old flavours seemed like treasures from a distant kingdom. Across the trench, a group of young soldiers passed along crumbling bits of bread, sharing a rare tin of warm water. Each crumb lingered in a palm just a little longer, carrying with it the quiet warmth of camaraderie. Glances exchanged without words said everything. Everyone was enduring the same unspoken challenge, to withstand hunger, to brave the cold, to swallow the taste of something no one had ever wished for. That morning the trench unfolded slowly. Steam from the soup slipped into the damp air, mixing with the stale scent of old bread, the wet soil beneath, and the unseen lives rustling in the dark corners. Every chuckle carried a layer of self-mockery. Every quiet look held a kind of knowing. Despite the hardship, despite the scarcity, There was a shared sense of fate in this breakfast of survival, a warmth passed between bowls and brittle crusts. In the bleak palate of War Brother Herd was baked into crumbs of bread, into jokes traded over cracked soup bowls. Here, where both stomach and spirit endured hourly trials, people inched closer to each other, offering what little they had without waiting for thanks. That breakfast had no whites, no sugar, no indulgence, yet it kept something essential alive, the spirit to begin again on a battlefield that stretched endlessly forward. This day in the trenches began like that. A breakfast stripped of sweetness, rich in grit, with flashes of resilience that glimmered between the grey. And you, surrounded by stale bread, thin broth, and the rustle of rats beneath the boards, came to understand you have become a part of this culinary underworld. A member of the family known simply as the survivors. A new day opened over the trenches, and with it came the unmistakable knock of survival instincts echoing through the minds living beside stale bread and the rustle of rats beneath the mud. Somewhere along the trench wall a thin streak of sunlight crawled upward, casting a glimmer across the damp sludge. The air pierced like pins into bare skin, turning every movement into a blend of sluggishness and urgency. After half-hearted breakfasts, men silently gathered their remaining crumbs, drained cups of watery soup, and sometimes even the lingering dullness clinging to their tongues. From moments like these, a strange idea began to emerge, born of hunger and the soul-numbing repetition of meals. Day after day of mouldy bread-limp roots and tired broth seemed to awaken a collective desire for something new. What began as a passing joke became a full-blown phenomenon, the Trench Master Chef contest. Soldiers took on the challenge of reinventing their rations into something that might resemble a real dish, scavenging ingredients from supply crates, muddy ditchy, even the rat trails threading beyond the trench walls. That day's rations offered little promise, the same as the day before. But tucked behind the corner of the dugout you spotted a limp potato clinging to life, a handful of wild greens, and a pungent scent later identified as chili seeds, presumably, courtesy of a rat's collection. Some soldiers crouched by a murky puddle nearby, fashioning a makeshift fishing net from old cans. They pulled up a single grey fish, no bigger than a thumb, smeared in mud and debris. Yet the sight of it lit up every eye in the group like buried treasure. They gathered close, clumsy hands scaling it, slicing the meat and tossing it into a bubbling pot, while whistling like chefs preparing coastal delicacies. These impromptu cooking competitions turned lunch in the trenches into tiny festivals. One soldier sliced bread into strips, soaked it in leftover wine, and called it pudding. Another stacked 2 slices of bread into what he proudly dubbed a trench sandwich, despite it holding nothing between them but the fine crust of dried mud. Occasionally someone would sneak a few old carrots from the supply room, cut them into tiny pieces, and share them like sacred offerings. When discovered, the punishment was a week of kitchen duty, but the tale lived on like a badge of culinary courage. Every mutated dish carried the sharp sound of laughter. No one had come to the trenches to be a chef yet, each had to invent new ways to stay alive. A bland bowl of soup might suddenly take on the green hue of wild herbs, the sharp heat of rat-carried chilies, or the faint aroma of crushed tobacco leaves added for flavour. One soldier, proud of his latest creation, explained how to release essential oils from potato peels, or infuse the broth with juice from forest leaves. The entire trench erupted into laughter, the kind born from sheer disbelief at just how far creativity could go when stretched between survival and madness. Each new dish marked a communal event. Soldiers circled around with dented tin bowls, judging not by numbers but by bursts of laughter, loud thigh slaps and victorious cheers. Even the worst-tasting inventions earned applause simply because they dared to be different. These hardened men, once dejected by the sight of another dry loaf, now found joy in broth, with a new aroma, a sandwich without a filling, or a hot drink smelling faintly of wildflowers. Inside this strange competition you noticed the trench air beginning to dry out, not from weather, but from warmth. Hunger loosened its grip, chased away by laughter and shared invention. The oldest veterans joined in swapping stories from past winters, like the time they made rodent potato soup or grilled bread over a shell casing, giving it a smoky chewiness no one could forget. The energy stretched until dusk, when bowls emptied, and the odd smell of these experimental dishes mingled with the trench's usual perfume of mud, gunpowder and chill. Dirt-streaked hands passed around the final crusts, eyes met in silence, and in every look was the same simple message: as long as there is creativity and laughter, there is still hope. Human instinct, it seemed, always found a way out, even when ingredients consisted only of mouldy bread, watered-down broth, a few limp leaves, and a heart that refused to quit. The Trench MasterChef ended without a winner or a prize. Everyone ate, everyone laughed, and everyone won the war against blandness, boredom, and the ache of homesickness. You still smile at the memory of that absurd game, the way it helped carry you through the hardest days and kept something untamed, alive in your soul. From that moment on, it became clear. Between shells and silence, the two rarest spices in a soldier's life were laughter and invention. The one who still experiments with flavour, who still jokes about stale bread or dead-end recipes, is the one who still carries the will to face tomorrow. And so the trench's finest chefs were born. Not from cookbooks, but from mud, from camaraderie, and from the defiant brilliance of those who survived the edge of the world. Deep within the trenches, where every flavour of freedom lay buried beneath layers of mud and sweat, a quiet undercurrent of instinct and improvisation pulsed through the gloom, a longing for something sweet, something ordinary. Beneath the hard crust of military regulations and strict rationing, an invisible market threaded its way through the dugouts, a black market quiet as a trickle of water, yet rich with forbidden promise. Here a square of chocolate or a sip of liquor passed hand to hand in shadows more valuable than any weapon. In the trenches, prohibitions hovered like bayonets, sternly forbidding unauthorized food and stamping out every trace of unsanctioned trade. But the more rigid the rules, the more vivid the market became. Every crevice in the trench buzzed with small transactions. British troops traded dry cigarettes for a sliver of sweet French chocolate. On the German side, a juicy piece of sausage often found its way across enemy lines with little more than a casual nod or a knowing glance over muddy borders. Ottoman soldiers meanwhile slipped slices of coarse bread from beneath their wool coats, passing through cramped tunnels fondly nicknamed rat roads, bartering them for a piece of cheese or a sprinkle of black pepper. This market without sign or structure followed its own rhythm, discreet yet bustling. Each petty smuggler became a vital gear in an underground economy where the true value of a candy bar could soar to 100 times that of a standard meat ration. One day, as the men huddled around discussing the latest batch of bread, someone quietly drew a small chocolate from his sleeve wrapped in faded silver foil. That candy travelled across dirty fingers, each soldier biting off the smallest corner, closing his eyes as sweetness melted across his tongue, a summer breeze slipping into a winter of mud. Behind these rare treats, trench life occasionally flared with absurd little dramas. One soldier, having saved for a week to hoard liquor, hid it beneath the ammunition box. When he finally uncorked it, ready to savour every drop, his snoring, the aftermath of a solo celebration, rattled the whole trench awake. The bottle was discovered, but instead of scolding, the entire unit erupted into laughter, passing the bottle in a silent toast to mischief and morale. Sometimes the mood lightened even further with impromptu counterfeit food inspections. Soldiers took turns playing supply officers, raiding each other's bags and punishing the guilty by forcing them to eat leftover cold rations or drink the dregs of tepid water. These antics didn't just offer amusement. They blurred the lines between discipline and rebellion, turning the trench into something that resembled a family, built not by blood but by enduring the endless night together. Hunger didn't always weaken the men. More often it sharpened their courage and sparked creativity. Scarcity became the engine behind these strategic exchanges, reinforcing trust between comrades. Every breadcrumb, every thin slice of sausage, every piece of contraband chocolate carried weight far beyond its size. When someone handed you a shard of that black market sweet, it melted on more than your tongue. It reached deep into memory, pulling you back to kitchens, to holidays, to places far from war. The trench black market was not just a supplier of food, it was a wellspring for the spirit. In a world choked with mudblood and gunpowder trading, it became a way to reclaim a sliver of control, to relive a sliver of ordinary life. Every secret deal brought a flicker of joy. Every unexpected gift lit a brief candle in the dark. At day's end, as the oil lamps flickered yellow across the muddy walls, the black market slipped back into silence. But its echoes lingered in the passing of a shared drink, in the gleam of joy when someone received a rare sweet bite in the dryer. Laughter laced with sympathy and stubborn brotherhood. These invisible threads held the soldiers together, carried them from one bitter winter to the next through battles and across the aching bridge of homesickness. In some unspoken way, the trench black market nourished more than bellies. It fed resilience. It offered optimism inside the black cloak of war. Anyone who once tasted that traded chocolate knew what it meant to feel like a child again, even for a second inside hell. And so each day began with the quiet hope of finding something small and sweet amid the vast and violent, a flicker of liberty inside a caged world, a whisper of peace inside the shattered belly of a trench. There were days in the trenches when everything felt grey and cold to the bone. Time passed like stale crusts of old bread dry, tasteless, reduced to the sound of a wooden spoon scraping the bottom of a battered tin bowl. Then, like lightning before a storm, a rumour surged faster than shellfire. A special ration had arrived. Fresh horse meat and liquor shared evenly across the trench. Instantly the air changed. Movements quickened, eyes lit up with the hunger for something far greater than food. The trench transformed into a kind of underground banquet hall, where sensations swelled into a quiet tide of excitement. Candles hastily made from leftover grease at the bottom of mess tins flickered from old cans set on the ledges. Their flames were dim but steady enough to light up the grinning faces around them. Empty bullet casings, dented water tins and warped metal cups were repurposed as makeshift goblets. No one cared about portions or fairness, just a bite of something fresh, a gulp of warmth burning down the throat, and the celebration could begin beneath the damp soil. A thrill coursed through the trench. Men cooked and laughed, debating the best way to prepare horse meat. Someone revived an old tale that eating horse meat under a full moon would bring luck and fewer bombs. Under the warm amber candlelight, stories picked up strange embellishments, weaving magic into the usual scents of gunpowder, mud and blood, now mingled with sizzling meat and the fiery kick of strong drink. As the feast gained energy, the men challenged each other, with jokes, riddles and wagers over who would throw up first from the expired liquor or the slightly suspect meat. No one dared miss out, so each soldier sampled a little of everything. Some became local legends for chewing through rubber-tough meat without so much as a grimace. Others took a single sip, clutched their chests in mock agony, and collapsed into laughter loud enough to drown out the memory of fear. In the midst of it all, there were quiet gestures that needed no words. A soldier discreetly slipped the better part of his meat into a tin for a young recruit with a weak stomach. The act moved through the trench like a breeze understood by all, acknowledged by none, just a few nods, a firm hand on the shoulder. Together they raised their cups in silent tribute to camaraderie, knowing full well that tomorrow might return to hard bread and flavourless soup. Every bite passed hand to hand, every sip shared like treasure. Young soldiers huddled close, cheeks flushed with the heat of liquor, laughing as if hunger had never existed. Even the veterans smiled gently, letting their thoughts drift to long-lost celebrations back home. Singing erupted, mingling with distant artillery booms. Laughter rang out between the clinks of tin mugs, and the thunder of the front forming a defiant symphony of joy and resilience on a field claimed by death. You looked around. Faces glowed in the flickering candlelight, hands passing down crumbs of bread, stories told with dry wit and unwavering hope. This feast, this surprise blessing, gave them a moment of rare joy enough to quiet the explosions enough to push death back into its shadowed corners. At that moment, stomachaches and tough meat didn't matter. Petty concerns vanished into laughter and togetherness. There may be nothing more powerful than raising a cup together, sharing a cramped meal, and believing for one night that survival was a kind of beauty. That so long as you could eat together, talk together, hope together, the world still held a kind of goodness even in its ruins. As the candles burned low, no one moved. They lingered, trading stories, making promises to one another. If they survived, they'd feast again. They'd raise a glass to victory and remember this strange banquet in the trenches as one of the brightest battles of their youth. The happiness didn't last, but its warmth did just enough to carry each man forward step by step through whatever trial waited next. The feast ended in a quiet filled with gratitude and trust. You curled into your corner of the trench, listening to your own heartbeat as distant shelling faded into the night. Each leftover crumb, each drop of liquor on your tongue glowed with the heat of memory and the light of hope. It was only a simple meal in a broken place, yet it burned brightly enough to warm an entire winter to become the one story worth carrying. Forever a small act of defiance, a moment of joy that made you believe in life again inside the jaws of war. There were nights in the trenches when the cold felt like it was drilling straight into your bones. Every movement slowed down, huddled around a dying flame as if trying to capture the last scraps of warmth buried deep in the earth. That night was Christmas Eve, when time outside seemed to pause and time inside stretched so long each second felt like an entire lifetime. The pale moon leaned low across the grey sky, and on the ground below soldiers' shadows overlapped like tired silhouettes, each face thick with dried mud from endless days buried in cold soil. Then through the silence, a song rose from the opposite side, soft and solemn, threading its way through the steam of cold soup and the fading smell of half-burnt tobacco. No one spoke. Back pressed against the trench wall, everyone just listened. It wasn't the kind of music fit for ballrooms. It was hoarse, trembling, almost broken, but it was real. It sounded like the voice of someone who had circled despair and still chose to believe in something good. Across the field, faint candlelight flickered. Soldiers turned to each other, eyes wide with disbelief, as if they'd just witnessed something sacred in the middle of hell. No orders were given, no signal passed, yet slowly grey-clad figures began to climb out of the trenches. One held a crust of stale bread. Another clutched a half-wilted sausage. A few had cigarette packs tucked in their chest pockets. Others carried makeshift bottles crafted from old tin cans. From both sides, two lines moved toward each other across the muddy no-man's land. Their eyes watched carefully, their smiles cautious but sincere. This place, soaked in the echo of mortars, had suddenly turned into a strange gathering, ground for souls too tired to hate, too human to keep pretending. In that moment, everything faded, uniforms, flags, even the rusted weight of resentment. Gifts passed between hands without negotiation. A hard piece of bread, a shriveled sausage link, a crumpled cigarette pack, a mouthful of cheap liquor. These weren't just rations. They were tokens of something far richer than any commodity in the trench. Frozen fingers brushed in silence. Small laughs crept through bare branches. The clinking of spoons on tin echoed like a quiet toast among survivors. When they gathered around a shared fire, someone pulled out a ball made from tied rags. And just like that, a scrappy football match began. Each kick splashed mud. Each stumble drew laughter. The game was awkward, the footing miserable, but the joy was real loud and free. Rations became jokes. One soldier showed off a piece of bread hard enough to use as firewood. Another proudly displayed his mold-speck sausage. One recounted a time he got a slice of bread with a rat's toenail baked in, and somehow it became the biggest laugh of the night. Stories followed full of culinary horror and trench humour. Who'd been forced to swallow the worst soup? Who had survived the mystery toppings? Everyone agreed here you weren't just a victim of war, you were also a victim of the trench cook, a poor soul turned mad alchemist conjuring unforgettable meals from scraps and desperation. You glanced around and saw it clearly for the first time on the other side. They were just like you men wrapped in filth, starving, missing home. Their smiles, the way they passed the bottle, the quiet patience in their eyes, it all mirrored the brothers beside you. These weren't enemies. These were strangers trapped in the same nightmare who for one night could laugh like boys again. Hands shared bread, mouths passed the bottle, tobacco smoke curled gently in the winter air. Without speaking, you all understood this warmth, this strange peace, this moment of being fully human. It was more powerful than any rifle or rulebook. As the night deepened, each side quietly returned to their own trench, leaving behind the dying fire and the faint sweetness of something rare and full. Everyone carried something back, maybe just a crumb of bread, maybe a smile, maybe a whispered joke. The feeling lingered long after, like liquor soaking slowly into the bloodstream, a kind of fragile peace warming the corners of your memory. You slid back into your muddy trench with a heart that felt heavier and lighter all at once. The darkness closed in again. The fire was gone. The silence returned, broken only by distant gunfire and the soft gnawing of rats on earth walls. But something had shifted. Nobody said anything, but everyone held something new in their silence, a shared ember of warmth that might survive another cold dawn. In the depths of this war-torn earth, that rare Christmas night carved out a lesson deeper than any French about mercy, about survival, about remembering who we are beneath the mud and metal. Tomorrow might bring watery soup and rock-hard bread again, but one smile, one shared look, one story carried forward that was enough to carry you through. The ceasefire ended, but the memory of it would echo in every step, every dream, every breath, a tiny light that refused to die in the cold. When night settled over the trench, the silence grew heavier than usual. Only the wind hissed through cracks in the earth walls, the breath of soldiers lay shoulder to shoulder, and the scent of damp soil mingled with the fading smoke from the kitchen fire. That was the moment when souls softened, when a full stomach never meant much, yet a single crumb of bread held every longing, every ache, every ounce of hope. You lay close beside your best friend, holding the last piece of bread from a long day. Small rough hardened to the core, it barely eased the hollow gnawing inside, yet with each bite it felt like chewing through a fragment of home. The old flour, musty and faintly bitter, dissolved slowly across your tongue, stirring memories of childhood dinners, family laughter behind kitchens from Subui, the calloused hands of your father breaking fresh loaves on holidays. Around you, silhouettes curled in thin blankets, their eyes tired, yet glinting with flickers of belief. Everyone guarded a private memory, a quiet reward only these nights could awaken. One man gently unwrapped a frayed handkerchief, revealing a single candy he'd hidden for months. In his mind bloomed the face of his son back home, the shy smile of his wife the day he left the sound of spoons in clinking bowls. That candy nestled in his pocket carried a promise of tomorrow worth reaching for. You chewed slowly, savouring each bland trace of home. Every freezing breath, every subtle sigh of those beside you added to the hushed song of longing. Somewhere in the dark, someone began to weep, the sob so faint it melted into the wind. The sting in your eyes came not from cold, but from everything unspoken. Your hand found your friend's shoulder, a quiet squeeze where words failed. Everyone understood behind each soldier lay a home, someone waiting, hoping. Dinner in the trench became a silent vow: survive, return, reunite. Across the dugout, small groups recalled old meals and traded tales of warm dishes from better days. Someone's memory of a New Year feast lit up the whole group, though every eye shimmered. The taste of home reached out through bread crusts, whispering into sleep, feeding the will to endure, to dream, to love again. Outside, the wind grew sharper, cutting through layers of wool. The scent of cold soup lingered on sleeves faded tobacco, trailed into the darkness. Yet somewhere in that picture warmth flickered. Someone whispered a recipe their mother once made. Another painted scenes of future Peace Village fairs, open tables. Each bowl of watery soup, each half-eaten crust, every hidden candy became a thread tying past to present to a better someday. You ended your night with a weary smile. Looking up, stars blinked behind cloud slits, and it felt like being wrapped in memory and brotherhood. The meal lacked richness but overflowed with feeling. Longing for peace, the hunger to survive, the aching hope of family dinners returned. All of it stirred something fierce, something quiet that carried soldiers into the next morning. The trench meal ended in stillness, but its aftertaste lingered long. In the depth of hunger and cold, of hardship and silence, people still held on to hope to each other. Every bite became a bridge leading them beyond war back toward the warmth of home. In the dark where danger waited, humanity and memory glowed faint yet defiant, keeping alive those left to remember. Night returned once more to the battlefield. The sky streaked with dull lead stars, blurred like worn pages of an old story. Somewhere in your memory you closed your longing with a bite of cold bread, its taste grounding you in forgotten kitchens and untouched holidays. The journey through 8 seasons of hunger, laughter, frost and silence now found its end, yet the details throbbed as if they happened only yesterday. And now, in this fast-paced world, someone might ask, if dropped into that trench, how many days could you last? Would you survive a week on stale bread, muddy broth, canned mystery meat and laughter in the dark? In an age obsessed with survival shows and extreme eating, the question echoes louder than before. The taste of stone bread or rat-flavoured soup might sound like a punchline, but for those who lived the trenches, every bite tested willpower and every swallow carried the weight of persistence. War took many things: health, youth, joy, even dreams of a real meal. Yet amid death's breath, something endured. The will to live. Laughter between those who had nothing left to share. The hand offering crumbs as if it were a feast. The joy of spotting something strange floating in soup. The secret candy was kept for return. These were not just meals, they were survival proof. Dining in the trench was never about appetite. It was about memory. A whispered promise to home. A need to feel normal, to sit and eat like any human again. The bread like stone, the bland broth, the shared tin cup of bootleg wine, even the smuggled candy tucked deep in a sock, all these became holy relics of resilience. Looking back at every meal that survived, one truth stands clear: as long as laughter echoed, as long as hands reached out, as long as belief burned slowly and steady, no hardship stood a chance. In the trench, each bite was glue for unity, a quiet lesson in grace under hell. And right and now, as you sit in comfort, ask yourself, have you ever tasted something unforgettable? Would you dare try a week of trench rations, 8-day bread, muddy soup, cold sausage and a smuggled candy? What would keep you going when everything else breaks? Maybe it's grit. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's something so small it hides in the last bite of a crust. Modern challenges. Viral food dares survival trends are pale echoes of the real thing. In the war trenches, a piece of stale bread was gold. A spoonful of soup was a blessing. The memory of those meals will live on, teaching anyone who ever rolled their eyes at dinner what gratitude really tastes like. So if you can share your story, challenge your friends to 7 days in the trench, let them taste every spoonful with every rice grain with love. Somewhere out there, people still dream of one plain meal of warmth on a long, tired day. Your smallest act of sharing can carry someone through the coldest winter, keeping alive what makes us human. Trench cuisine was never about what you ate. It was always about who you became because of it. A quiet hymn to endurance, a final test of unity, a sign that even in hell, faith, laughter, and compassion could carve out a pocket of heaven. So now tell us, what was the wildest thing you've ever eaten? Would you survive a week on trench food to discover what real willpower, real hope, and real connection feel like? Drop your thoughts, dare a friend, and remember, any meal shared with loved ones is a victory worth celebrating. Real strength often begins with a bite, a story, a moment of remembrance from those who once survived with nothing but heart.